G'day and welcome to another episode of Cuppa with the Jesuit. I'm Father Robin Koning, Provincial Assistant for Vocations.
And I'm Jesuit student Julian Butler, and Father Robin and I are joined today by Father Gregory Jacobs, who's the parish priest at Holy Family Emerton in Western Sydney. Father Greg, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me. It's good to be part of this program.
Father Greg, would you tell us a little bit about the parish community that you're the PP of? What's the community like? What gives you life from the community there?
So it's better known as the parish of Mount Druitt. And a lot of people will know that name. It's associated a lot with high unemployment, one of the largest Aboriginal communities in Australia, a lot of domestic violence, all of those sorts of different things. But it's also one of the more diverse, certainly dioceses in Australia, the Parramatta Diocese, and we're part of that. So we have a very large islander community. So we're blessed with 5 very good choirs. Not many parishes can say that. And there's a great sense of community that they bring to their sense of faith and fellowship. And so that's one of the joys and blessings that we have here. We have quite a high attendance rate. We've got a lot of young families. It's one of the poor areas, and so therefore families who are starting out, buying their first home, often come out here as their way of getting established. And so, we do a lot of baptisms through this community, and that's one of the great senses of the vibrancy of the parish here. So I really love it here. And again, the island, that the Filipinos bring their own charism and engagement with the church, and that's good and life-giving.
Father Greg, you mentioned some of the challenges in the Mount Druitt area, or certainly some of the perceived challenges and some of the very real ones too. What are some of the things that the parish at Holy Family offers on site and through its ministries to address some of those issues?
So it's not just a church and a presbytery that we have. We've got those, but we've also got a primary school and preschool. We've got 3 of our buildings have a historical association with the Aboriginal community. So there's the Babayan Aboriginal Corporation, a group of elders who have come together to help their own community. But also the Shed, the place where men come and talk and get some of their issues dealt with. It's funded by the university through the government on looking at suicide prevention. And so again, we look at a holistic way of looking at some of these things. So again, historically, the government has put a lot of money into this area, but it's always been often a 3-year program. Sometimes a 3-year program works very well. Sometimes you need 20 years or longer to really make sustainable change in some people's lives. And that's certainly what the church and part of what we're trying to do here is all about. But we've also got a food, clothing and furniture outlets here to recycle some of those things back to the community to help with our welfare in many different ways. St Vincent de Paul is on site here. Catholic Care Social Services are on site here, again, to help the huge level of demand that we face in this area. But then we're also supported by many different schools and other parishes around Sydney and whatever to help fund and support those works as best we can.
You talked about some of these issues requiring longer term engagement, which points to the school there, which Jesuits have been involved in various ways. I think you probably still are, but hasn't been a Jesuit school, but a Jesuit companion school. Is that something you yourself are involved in as well?
Yeah, so we actually hope to offer some chaplaincy, in fact, to 4 different schools. I really enjoy, as I said, that sense of building relationships with kids, and that's in the school or in the parish. Each of them bring God alive for me, and so I love getting inside the classroom and just engaging with the kids and engaging in their life and asking some of those God questions. And even those who don't believe in God, who have come to that school, it can be a very engaging conversation with them, and And again, that's one of the ways that I really see as an important part of the ministry of a parish, to be reaching out, not just to those who come to us, but reaching out to, those who aren't coming into our church doors.
Father Greg, talking about those God conversations as an educator with young people, one of the things that you bring to those conversations is a background in science. And I imagine in a culture which, not always, but often sees science and religion as sort of diametrically opposed, that must bring an extra kind of layer to the conversation.
So for me, part of my journey to the Jesuits was initially through science. I was working in a pathology lab, and before that in wool combing, and I really enjoyed the science part of that. But I also found, to some extent, it was a bit of a death experience of me getting locked into a cubicle and just doing science. So I had my science world and my science friends, and my religious world and my religious friends. And so part of the journey for me was trying to bring those two worlds together. And so I found some of the spirituality of the Jesuits to be really engaging in that, and certainly the history of, many Jesuits working in science, including in our own Australian province throughout its history. And so that's part of the journey that I had about coming to the Jesuits and thinking I don't have to give up that part of myself in order to become a priest. So that there were many Jesuits as priests who have gone back and worked full-time in science. But for me, eventually, as I worked out my own discernment about whether I should go back and do a PhD in chemistry, I was quite surprised at how easily in the end I let that go in my own discernment, that's no longer for me the path to take. And then almost instantly, as soon as I let that dream go, another dream opened up about that engagement with science and religion. And that's been a part of the way that I keep my science alive very much at the moment. And still at the moment, even working in the parish, or maybe especially working in the parish, that I very much keep, part of that time still devoted to my science reading and engagement. And particularly with Pope Francis at the moment and his Laudato Si, and that great sense of the environment and our need of care for our common home. It's really helped to bring alive for me some of that engagement of how the parish, and particularly because we have 14 acres, that I can actually do some things about the environment there and start to teach people about, the ways to live and care for our common home.
Gregory, you mentioned the attraction to the Jesuits in terms of that holding together of faith and reason, faith and science. Did you want to say anything more about that journey of attraction, how you came to know the Jesuits?
So for me, the part of the journey to the Jesuits was about, so I'm a twin, I'm an identical twin, and my twin brother first talked about religious life himself. But talking around the dinner table with mum and dad, when he first broached that with them, their first reaction was that we thought, that Greg would become the priest and not Chris. And that certainly surprised me, because I was going, no. I was very happy in my science world at the time and working with St. Vincent de Paul at the time. I realised, looking at my own reading at the time, that almost every book I was reading was either by Jesuits or about Jesuit spirituality. And I'd not yet met a Jesuit by that stage, but there was something in me that said, it's either going to be the Jesuits or nobody. I would go back and keep working in science if I wasn't called to the priesthood. And so, then I joined the Jesuits. It was partly that sense of trying to bring my different worlds together. Yes, coming into then the society and starting to explore, within the spirituality. And I certainly think for me, it was the spiritual exercises that, gave me the final keys that I needed to bring, all of that together. To meet some of the very inspirational Jesuits that, were part of my own formation or the communities that I lived in, but also the Jesuits of history that really helped to open up for me, the depth of our spirituality and that different ways of finding God in all things. And that's certainly one of the phrases that has really continued to speak to me, that I can find it in science just as much as I can find it inside a church. And so some of them may some of the really sacred moments of my life sometimes have actually been, out in nature or even in a city. And that's one of the areas that I'm trying to explore in my own journey of science and religion is, those different landscapes of where we find God. There's a lot written about God in the desert or God in the bush or in the wilderness, but very little written at the moment about God in the city or in the urban lifestyle. And if we can't find God here in the city, then maybe, we've got a lot bigger problems than what we, are facing otherwise. But if God can be found here, then, it can really help to integrate, hopefully, a spirituality for a lot more people who are living in urban lifestyle now.
Father Greg, earlier in talking about ecology, you mentioned Pope Francis, someone who's very interested and keen in exploring the ways that ordinary people meet God in their lives. Would you tell us as a Jesuit what his pontificate has meant to you?
Something from the very beginning of Francis, and even that famous first balcony scene of him coming out and just engaging with the people and being much more a person of the people, a very pastoral man, sort of thing that I really connected with him. I think it partly has to do with his Ignatian spirituality, but I don't think it's completely dependent on that aspect solely. But again, one of the other things I'm trying to work on at the moment is it was way back in 2015 that he had a quote in a speech that he made about that we're in a time not of an era of change, but a change of era. And that's really spoken to me at the moment. And so I'm trying to work out for myself, what is the vision of church that Francis has? What is this change of era? And particularly during, the lockdown that we had through COVID-19, it gave me a lot of good time just to reflect and deepen that sense of, what is the new church that we want to move into? Do we want to sort of go back to the same normal, or what sort of new normal can we develop as part of a church? And so I've really been inspired and engaged by, a lot of, or most of what Pope Francis says. So it's that sense of going out, that sense of being missioned. But in order to do that, what you really need is a great sense of your own personal engagement and relationship with Jesus. And I actually think a lot of people in our church actually don't have a personal relationship with Jesus yet. And so that's one of my key focus points at the moment, is to try and work on, and again, this is where Ignatius is so great, about opening up a personal relationship with Jesus, and that whole spirituality of engagement, of experience, of imagination, that's at the heart of the spiritual exercises. And so I think if people can find that, then the natural, evangelization or mission or going out of the church, becomes almost something necessary for them.
So, Gregory, if a young man in your parish came to you saying he was interested in the Jesuits, or a young man from anywhere really, what might you say to him? How would you encourage him, perhaps challenge him in that journey?
I guess it would be on that point of trying initially to build a relationship with Jesus, to have a personal encounter with Jesus. That's certainly what all the saints eventually have done, is to build on that key foundation of a personal relationship. I guess the other thing that I find, particularly talking about the Jesuit vocation and to prospective people, is also a sense of openness to the vocation, and maybe in a sense more so with the Jesuits, that we can and sometimes are asked to do things that we would not have chosen for ourselves. I never would have chosen to be a teacher, and yet that's one of the occasions where God really opened up to me, or opened up for me, who I am and my own potential and possibilities. And so being open to some of those different possibilities, so that you're not just joining the Jesuits to do one particular ministry for the rest of your life. Again, some of the irony is I joined the Jesuits so I wouldn't become a parish priest. I didn't want to be, particularly again growing up in the country where I felt I would be alone most of my life, coming home to an empty house. And that's why I joined a religious order rather than a diocesan priesthood. And yet this is where God has sent me. And this, again, this is where I find great life and energy and a great sense of the companionship of Jesus by being in the parish and being parish priest. And so I guess that's one of the things I would want to, see within a vocation journey, is that openness to go where the Spirit leads.
Well, Father Gregory, it's been great having this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too, and I hope to see more videos and more engagement and a great sense of the growing church around Australia. So thank you.